Well. So, how did we get to the penultimate episode this quickly? What? It's Romania Black. We're on episode 11 of Puella Magi Madoka Magica. I'm kind of in a state of denial right now because I am like, oh, we have this episode, we have next week, and we have a movie. And that's all we got. And I'm like, no, why? Why do we not have more? Last week, I didn't have as much to talk about last week because it was like all of the things that I'd been theorizing about with Homura were kind of confirmed. Just, confirmed to a degree of craziness. And it's like, well, we've seen all the bad timelines, so that's good, right? What else can there be? What else can there be? And then I was thinking about it today and I was like, what else can there be? I just kind of like zoomed in and I was like, oh shit. So I wanted to watch this episode before I went on vacation. I was like, okay, let's go ahead and watch this and do this. Because I already had a lot of comments to talk about. So I was like, if I wait until next week, it's just going to be like a 50 minutes of me going through comments, I'm sure. But I'm really bummed. I'm already sad that there's just this episode next week and a movie and that's all I get. I want more Madoka. And I know, please don't tell me any details. All I know is that there is another movie that supposedly is going to come out maybe at the end of this year, maybe into 2025. And that's really exciting. That's awesome. Give me all the Madoka content, please. But I'm so bummed that we're only going to get to Madoka to this. It's like, normally you have a series that's 12 episodes and you're like, oh, it's just going to be a little series. And you feel kind of sad about it when it's over. This one, I'm devastated. And so I want to savor these last 2 episodes in this movie for as much as I can. I want to savor it because it has been such a ride and such an experience this series and I freaking love it. So, and I'm sure, hopefully you all have enjoyed the reactions and discussions, but I haven't been able to look at chapter or episode 10's comments yet, but I'm sure that's going to be a fun time. Anyway, let's dive into some of these comments, shall we? So, Math was making a joke being like, Kyubey, incubator, tour. And I was like, damn it, I should have seen it coming. The joke's right there. It's just that little mother trucker sitting on the shelf watching me, waiting. Rip him up. Emery Warner, 16, as well as Uploader 109, they both kind of had similar comments talking about in Japan, the concept of the body and soul is a little bit different than Western cultures. So both of their comments were basically talking about how Japan directly links the body and soul being together as important, that you need both of them, they're there. Whereas in a lot of Western cultures, the body is just a vessel. It's like this body is a vessel. The soul is a separate entity. So if your soul gets separated from your body, like it's not the worst thing that could happen as long as your body has as long as your soul has a vessel and it can exist. Whereas in Japanese culture, if your soul is separated from your body, you're basically no longer human and you're considered something entirely different. So I think it is important to differentiate that cultural expectation because I'm from a Western culture perspective. So when they were like, oh, the soul's separated from the body. Oh no. My version of the implications are a little bit different than Japanese perspective, right? Going into that. Also, Kyubey says early on that humans can't physically see or control their souls. And the magical girls are just a way to make that more convenient. Like what could go wrong? Right? What could go wrong? Emil, CSDLEB, it was like, don't think it spells a word, talks about actually that there's 2 other series other than Psychopaths and other than Puella Magi Madoka Magica that is by the creator of this series. One is Fate Zero, which I have heard of Fate Zero before. Fate Zero has actually been on the polls before, so it will probably be on the polls in the future, so that's exciting to know. Another one is a series, it's a puppet show called Thunderbolt Fantasy. I've actually had a surprising number of recommendations of this series over the past few weeks, which I think is because I'm watching Puella Magi Madoka Magica. I don't know if Thunderbolt Fantasy would ever win a poll or not, but I have my Friday slot where it's just shows that I want to watch. I definitely am going to put Thunderbolt Fantasy on the short list of that because it sounds bonkers, and I'm like, please, okay. But it's 39 episodes split over 3 seasons, so like I've said with a couple other shows, I want to get through a couple smaller shows first. But Thunderbolt Fantasy on my short list, I'm pretty excited about that, so thank you for the recommendation. Say Huckleberry, be nice. Say yes said that they were talking about how magical girls probably do age, and they have aged in the show. I didn't notice that during the discussion when I was talking about it, but having gone back and re-looked at some episodes, yes, y'all are correct. They do seem like they are aging. Yes, so that's interesting. The thing about it is, I don't think magical girls ever get to the point where they get old because they turn into witches before then. And Homura is not necessarily aging because she keeps going back in time. So her whole timing and aging cycles are probably all messed up. So that's interesting to know. And then Arksay talks about how, I really liked this, that mommy's advice was to not make a wish for another person without knowing what they want. And then Kyoko's advice to Sayaka was to not make a wish for another person without knowing what you really want. So I thought that that was interesting because we can relate it back to Homura in the last episode. At the beginning, Homura makes that wish for to save Madoka and to be able to go back and talk to her again. And at first, it's kind of like you have to question, like, well, did Homura know what Madoka wanted, and did she know what she actually wanted? But I think, honestly, by the end of episode 10, Homura did know that that's what she wants. She's dedicated now. She wants to go back and save her only friend. She got that part that Kyoko was talking about correct. And she finds out from Madoka. Madoka's like, just try to keep me from seeing Kyubey. That's all I can ask for. So it's like, by the end of it, Homura gets what both Kyoko and Mommy were trying to say. If you're going to make a wish for somebody else, it has to be the right wish. And I think Homura got it right, even though it's put her in a perpetual, endless cycle of repeating the past. But what can we do? And then finally, Max Motto 1826 talked about the witch that was seen in episode 7 is Elsa Maria, and she's known as a self-righteous witch with a self-righteous nature. But the way that they described him in the comment for episode 7, it did seem like she kind of fit exactly into the themes of both Sayaka and Kyoko for that episode. Just insane. I'm having so much fun with Madoka. I'm not joking. If I could binge watch this series, I would, but I would regret it because I want to savor it because we only have these 3 episodes, movie technically as an episode, left. So I'm going to savor it and enjoy it all I can. But let me tell you, I am so sad there's only 3 more weeks of Madoka, and I want more. And that's a sign of a really good show when it leaves you wanting more, and it's not. They're giving us another movie at some point, which I am over the moon about, but I'm just like, man, this show's just like, this is all you get. It's kind of like in the theme of the show, being like, it's fleeting. Enjoy it while you can. And I'm like, ah! So I feel like I've talked enough, right? My dogs have been very, very needy today, so please excuse them. But we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive into this episode. It's the penultimate one, y'all. I'm not ready. Not one bit. But what can we do? We're going to start episode 11 of Puella Magi Madoka Magica. We're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And I'll see y'all on the other side. We got 1 episode left. Oh. And then a movie. And then a damn movie. Oh my God. Oh. So the crazy thing is that last week I was like, well, each time Homura keeps on going back, changing the past, it makes Madoka the magic stronger and stronger and stronger. Or so it seemed. This episode we get confirmation of that. And I'm going to turn my sound down, of basically the time traveling and turning back the past. Someone had mentioned in the comments, and I think it's important to bring up the idea that this is why Kyubey was like, she was an anomaly from the start, because she technically is an anomaly. Kyubey didn't make the contract with her, the current Kyubey timeline, but a different timeline Kyubey. So he's like, oh wow, you must have made a timeline contract with somebody else. And Kyubey kind of figured out what was going on. But At this point, yeah, we would think at this point in the series, knowing everything we know about Homura last episode, it's like, okay, well, we've ran through all the different timelines, all the different scenarios, the worst case scenarios. They keep on getting worse and worse, so she'll just keep going back and trying to fix things, right? But Kyubey kind of throws a wrench in that this episode and is like, hey, yeah, you can, I'm just going to tell you this so you know, you could keep going back and trying to change the past, but all you're doing is making Madoka more and more and more volatile as both a magical girl and a witch. So you're kind of just shooting yourself in the foot. Yeah, so it's basically like Kyubey's like, you should have just let her die the first time and then we wouldn't have had this problem. But because you wanted friendship, we now have this endless cycle. And the crazy thing about it is, it's like at this point, what should have happened, as sad as it is that Madoka, she would have died, and so would have Homura. And that's it. And that would have been the timeline, end of story. That's all she wrote. And then the Walpurgisnacht, or whatever, the Walrus Witch, as I'm calling her, I guess she would have just rampaged. And that would have been that. We're going to talk about the witch, about the head honcho witch, the mother lode. We're going to talk about her in a hot second. But that would have been it. That would have been it. They would have died, and then that's all she wrote. But Homura, because she loves Madoka and views as her only friend, she decided to make the wish to go back, and she created this loop that basically made Madoka just go, because at the very beginning, in the first timeline, Madoka was not OP. She was just like a magical girl that was getting the hang of things, and she didn't really know what to do. But because Homura keeps going back and changing the timeline, now she's OP, and it's like a double-edged sword. She's going to be this incredible magical girl, but if she falls, she's going to be this incredible witch. And that's all there is to it. And so it kind of has created this situation where Homura can't go back now. It's set in stone. She's gave her soul up. It's too late. And she just created this infinite loop that's just making things worse and worse. And it's so... And you know what? You have to give Kyubey a little bit of credit, because Kyubey's been honest. Kyubey's like, yeah, we kind of view your planet as livestock. I don't know. But he is deceptive. But he's like, he's honest. But he's also a trickster at the same time. He's going to tell you the truth, but he's also going to tell you whatever convenient truths he feels like telling in the moment. Like, he could have brought all this up way earlier, but now it's like Kyubey decides to tell the truth at the most convenient and heartbreaking time to give you the most convenient and heartbreaking situation. And the problem is that if Homura fails, if she stops, then the despair is going to mount up on her, and she's going to become a grief seed and a witch. Like, either she keeps on going and making the timeline worse, or she dies, right? Or she kills herself, but that doesn't seem to be the case. I mean, she could die. Do I think that Madoka would kill Homura? Here's the thing. I want to say no. But if Madoka's like, you keep on doing this to yourself over and over again, you've thrown yourself into this loop, you're my best friend, you can't kill me, but you keep going back and changing it. So to keep you from going back and changing the past over and over again and making the situation worse and making yourself spiral, and to keep you from suffering, is Madoka going to go all Old Yeller on Homura? Because let's look at the options. Because here I wrote up here that, like, Madoka, if she doesn't become a magical girl, everybody's in danger. Like, Anthony in the Discord pointed out, they were like, every time somebody tells Madoka not to become a magical girl, things just go from bad to worse, because it seems like that has to happen. It's like the universe has chosen Madoka to be a magical girl, and every time they try to change it and make it to where it doesn't happen, it just makes the scenario worse and worse and worse. So... And Homura may not be the first time that somebody's tried to go into the past to change things. There could be other girls, magical girls in the past, that have tried to change things as well, especially knowing how long Kyubey and them have been here. So there's a strong possibility that this whole scenario has kind of played out in other aspects or other avenues before. But, you know, my thing was when the walrus witch came, I was like, could they all just leave? Could they all just leave? Is the witch gonna follow them? Or is it like, because Kyubey said that they blamed everything on a natural disaster. So anytime like it seems like, I like the world building that each time a witch has shown up that has been of the magnitude of this Motherlode witch, every time that's happened, they just blame it on saying it's a natural disaster because they can't see it. I like that world building. I like that it causes a cataclysmic event and they just blame it on something else. That's always really fun when you have those types of world building situations in a story, especially if it's like a modern story. So I think that's really cool. But I'm like, could they just leave? Could they evacuate? Could they get in a car and drive away and then come back in like a week and the witch is done? She's gone on her business. Can they do that? Is that possible? I'm like, can we just take the pacifist route and just leave? And then the witch like runs amok and causes havoc. And yeah, she'd kill a bunch of people, but then she'd go away and then that's all she wrote. But that would be cowardly, running away and putting all those people's lives in danger. But I'm like, here's the thing. If I knew that Madoka was in a position where if she becomes a magical girl, she's also going to become a witch that's going to destroy the planet, I'd be like, hey, I know that this is cowardly and we're sacrificing all these people, but if we let you go through with this, the world is doomed anyway, so you want to just like run off for a week? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, what? That's such a cowardly thing to do. I feel like Sayaka's saying that, but I'm like, at this point, it's either that or the world gets destroyed, so it's like, what do we do? So, I don't know. That part is one of the things. And then, like, if she becomes a magical girl, is she going to eventually become a witch or not? So that kind of leads us to our options here before we dive into this episode anymore. Our options are, going into this final episode, because now we're like getting time travel involved. The options are, 1, Homura resets the timeline, which is what I kind of thought going into this episode that we were going to eventually get to. But Kyubey has kind of put a stop to that. Kyubey's like, let's back up and think about this. But now it's like, if you reset the timeline, Madoka is only going to get more tied to her fate. Kyubey's like, yeah, I conveniently didn't tell you that if you keep doing this, you're only going to make her stronger. Look, I'm just trying to meet an energy quota. like, it really is. Kyubey's like, yeah, I could have told you about that, and the problems of that, and the consequences of time travel and all that. But, you know, I really gotta, we've been here a couple thousand years. We really gotta meet this quota so we can get out of here. So if you could just go ahead and do this, sure. Oh my God. So that's option 1. Is that she just keeps resetting the timeline, but it's only putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. It's not solving the problem, which is a thing. The second thing is, the worst case scenario is that Homura becomes a witch, and with the wall whatever witch, and then it's just like, that's the bad scenario. We don't want that. I mean, it's just as bad as Madoka becoming a witch too, but I feel like Madoka stopped that from happening, so we don't have to worry about that option. Here's the thing. If Homura dies right now, then chances are that the Motherlode witch will probably cause destruction. Probably. But would it kill Madoka and the others? And if she dies now, would Madoka's current timeline be the last one? This also is a bad ending. And I don't like this ending at all either. But I'm like, for a second there, I thought that Madoka was going to be like, sorry, Homura, and she just kills her. Kind of like what Homura did to her in the one timeline. But, because like technically if Homura dies now, she can't reset the timeline ever again. The timeline can't be reset. Madoka could become a magical girl and defeat the Motherlode witch. But then chances are Madoka will become a giant witch and destroy the world. So it's like, it's a bad case scenario anyway. That's like the most pessimistic ending possible, because then in that case, it's like what was the lesson? It's just like, well, nope, we've met the quota. Now Kyubey can leave, and then they'll leave, and that'll be the end of things. and that's the end. But the Earth will be destroyed, so it doesn't really matter. That seems like such a pessimistic ending. So never mind. I don't think Madoka is going to kill Homura, but that is an option. That is something that is on the table right now. So that leaves us with the thing of like, well, if Homura's not going to die and Madoka wants to save her, what do we do with that? So the other option would seem to be on the surface that Madoka becomes a magical girl and saves Homura. My thing, too, with all of that is the whole last flashback that we had in the last episode where Madoka one-shotted the Motherlode Witch and instantly became a witch. I feel like the reasoning behind that was, one, she thought Homura was dead. She thought Homura had, like, fallen to her death and became a magical girl to take revenge on the witch and then became a witch herself. But in this case, she not only knows that Homura is okay. She's by her side. She's not in great shape, but she's by her side. She could heal herself. She's a magical girl. Even though she's bloody and her legs caught, she could heal herself. But also, she's had this talk about Homura and them being friends. Now, they were friends and had the talk earlier, so... But in this case, Madoka has all of the knowledge that Homura has given her about being a time traveler, so maybe that'll make a difference. She has the friend and time travel knowledge. I don't know. I don't exactly know how Madoka saving Homura and becoming the magical girl and fighting the witch is going to end any differently than the last timeline where she instantly becomes the all-powerful witch that destroys the world. I mean, the only thing about it is we're going to talk about this whole conversation about hope and how that goes, right? Because Kyubey, even though he's like, oh, let me be of service and give you like a little history lesson, and it seems to be all well and good, there is a malicious intent behind it, which we're going to talk about. But I think maybe Homura's found a way to work past that. That's the part I don't know. Like, that's the part I'm not sure, like, how is she... Kyoko and Sayaka joked episodes ago about, like, you know, using friendship and saving the day. I think it was Kyoko that made that joke, but it didn't seem like that was going to be the case. So now I'm like, well, but what do we do? Like, is that actually going to be a thing? And how can we make that a thing? And so I'm feeling like the mom's conversation with the teacher, which that scene was incredible and I loved it. And I was like, oh, I had like a whole bunch of theories going on, which I don't think are going to prove true at all. But I'm going to tell you where my headspace went during that scene, because I had like a whole thing figured out. And then by the time Madoka's conversation with her mom ended, I was like, maybe not. But yeah. The karmic, it says a magical girl's latent potential is based on the weight of the karmic destiny she bears. So, a magical girl's value as a witch, essentially, is measured alongside the karmic destiny she bears. So basically, Kyubey, he lures these girls into becoming magical girls and making wishes, knowing that the wish that they make is going to end up turning them to a witch of equal value. And I'm like, bitch, you know exactly what you're doing. How dare you? So, the shot of Madoka, they're like, that's why Kyubey was so mystified by her at first, because he's like, she seems like a normal girl, so if she had been a queen or a princess, she has all this karmic destiny around her, I could see why she would become a magical girl, hinting at how long Kyubey's been around. But she's so ordinary. He's like, I just didn't understand until I figured out what you were doing. Madoka became a more powerful magical girl because of you. You were the cause. And it's like, damn. And Kyubey just saying that is like, you know exactly what you're doing, you monster. You traveled in time to protect her. And by turning back time over and over again for the same reason and goal, you caused multiple timelines to converge together and center around her, and the threads of fate linked together in this timeline, and that's why her potential is so huge. I'm like, oh my god. And that shot of her like strung up by the strings of time and like the gears and everything, that's so good. I'm like, the writing's so good. I love it. I'm like, yes, that's just, it's just like, I love that it takes the time travel narrative, which time travel narratives are hard. They are hard to do without there being plot holes. They are hard to do without something being wrong. But in this case, it's like, no, the butterfly effects are all adding up, and they're all making sense. And I'm like, oh my God. It's absolutely insane. Right? It's insane. He's like, all the destiny you sent spinning across those different timelines keep converging into this one. They all keep converging back to the same timeline. So eventually, no matter what happens, they're all going to converge. And then Kyubey is like, everything you did was for her. I'm like, oh, what a bitch thing to say. He's like, it's all your fault, but you were trying to save her and protect her. I'm like, oh, you mother trucker. He's like, excellent work, Homura. You raised her to be the most powerful witch we've ever seen. And Kyubey's just like, well, you did my job for me, so thanks. I'll be able to meet that quota. Really appreciate it. I still don't understand the long-haired Madoka, but I'm guessing we might find out by the end of this. And the black cat has not been explained, which may never get an explanation. The only thing I have left to guide me. Ugh. It's like, what is left to guide you but your own will? So anyway, the fact that they have, like, Sayaka Miki's funeral, like, on the... It's not funny. It was just weird to see it, like, on the lanyard there, like, out. I was like, oh my God, that's just right there, huh? The body of her was found in a downtown hotel, which Kyoko was staying at a random hotel. They wouldn't know whose hotel it was, and they're just brushing it under the rug. Ugh, it's terrifying. So, yeah. And then that's how Madoka finds out. That shot of Madoka, like, with her classmates and she's the only one illuminated, it's so tragic. The police haven't ruled out murder, or what'd they say? The police haven't ruled out murder or an accidental death in this investigation. And they're like, now on to the weather! And it's like, oh my God! It's like, they're just like, now on to the weather forecast. Hope that was fun for you. I'm like, oh my God. Let's just move on to the next thing. Moderate winds in the northwest accompanied by rain. Oh. That shot of Madoka in the rain with the umbrella is so good. It's just, God, I feel so bad for Madoka because she's like so torn. Like, what does she do? And you know what? The mom was so interesting in this episode because she, the first time she sees Madoka, she's all like, hey, welcome back. Like trying to get on her good side and trying to figure out what's wrong. But she was so soft. It's like a side of the mom we haven't really seen in this series so far. And her, like, brushing the raindrop and everything. And then Madoka comes in there. Again, all the chairs. Just randomly there. And the mom thinks that something's going on. But Madoka won't tell her. And the mom doesn't want to press it. The moment that Madoka gets back to her room and is just on the bed, she looks just like a doll. She looks just like a doll that's just collapsed onto the bed there. And it's really... And then Kyubey shows up. And I like how small Kyubey looks on the shelf. Kyubey looks so tiny. He just looks like a little doll, like stuffed animal, alongside the rest of them. Oh. And Madoka calls him out and is like, why didn't you stop these deaths from happening? I like how Kyubey goes from last episode, where he was like, oh, you all are just like important sacrifices. You all are like martyrs and you're helping your people. You guys are getting off the planet eventually. Just think of it that way. This episode, he drops all pretense. He's like, I mean, have you ever felt guilty about your hamburgers that you eat? And it's like, it's like he goes from martyrs to hamburgers in like a hot second. I'm like, Kyubey, oh my God. And so then this conversation here, where he's like, well, do you ever feel guilty about your livestock that you eat? Do you ever think about how that meat ends up on your table? And Kyubey, like, looks through her eyes to show her. The idea that the chickens and the livestock with, like, the witch visions, for a hot second, I thought he was gonna, like, basically, because the pig's having his eyes, which are terrifying, by the way. I thought for a second that Kyubey was gonna be like, well, Homura's not helping me. I'm just gonna spurn Homura and Madoka into turning into a witch now. I thought Kyubey was going to try to like trigger Madoka into falling into a pit of despair and turning into a witch herself, which was freaking me out just a slight bit. And she's like, stop showing me that. And he's like, well, that's not a rational reaction. And I'm like, oh my God, Kyubey, you're terrifying. And he's like, if you found that vision to be cruel, then you're not seeing the whole picture. And the way he describes it, and saying, like, in exchange for one day becoming food for humans, The livestock are provided for all their lives and sheltered from natural selection. Like, yeah, he basically is describing it being like, you know, you guys keep cows and you make them reproduce and you eat them and everything. So, I mean, how is this any different? Like, why are you mad at us? We're just doing what you all do to livestock. The thing of it is, though, is, you know, comparing humans to livestock is not exactly an equal exchange. And the thing of it is also, Kyubey, his example of the cows out in nature shows them like skinny and gaunt and like not surviving, and they're like on a mountaintop, and he's like, well, they have far higher rates of reproduction in captivity than they do in the wild. And I'm like, Kyubey, I'm going to challenge you a little bit on that, because there are some animals that breed pretty well in the wild versus captivity. I don't know. I might call you out on that statistic and logic. And also, he's being manipulative, because cattle and stuff can be well off out in the wilderness just fine compared to captivity. They had been for thousands of years. I'm like, now look, you're stretching the truth there, Kyubey, just a wee bit. And they're like, isn't it? Now, the one thing is, he's like, wouldn't you call that a symbiotic relationship? Sure. My family raised livestock and still raise livestock, and sometimes we eat them. So yes, yeah, it is a symbiotic relationship. Sure. But there's not really anything like, you know, the whole thing with witches and the idea of equal energy exchange and all this, like, and the fact of the deception and nefariousness that goes on with it is a logical fallacy. It is not equatable terms. They are not on equal levels the way he would like them to be. And I'm like, Kyubey, I'm going to have to disagree with you and say that this is a false equivalency, is what we would call this logical fallacy. They are not equal the way you are describing them. Kyubey would like you to think that, and maybe that's how he thinks of it, but I think Madoka would disagree, and I think we would all disagree as well. He's like, we're way more accommodating than you are with the livestock. He's like, we're not perfect at it, but at least we negotiate. I'm like, bitch, you are a used car salesman. How dare you, not perfect at it, my ass. Like, yeah, sure. Like, Kyubey is trying to be like, I'm just a humble little negotiator. I'm just a little incubator. I don't know what you're getting at. Yeah. And then he's like, how about I show you the history mankind has spent together with the incubators? I thought this was genius. I love this point of writing where Kyubey has been like, we've been around since the dawn of time, since we found mankind. We've been around since we've been involved with your civilization before your recorded history. There are like countless girls throughout history, and there's like Cleopatra that's involved in that. There's like all of these different, like they show all the different magical girls, the witches, all throughout time, and all of the destruction. They show Joan of Arc, they show queens. They're like, we have changed history and elevated your society to new stages of development. Basically suggesting, too, that some of the weaponry was to counter the witches that they helped create. It's insane. Now, do we believe Kyubey entirely that humankind is not responsible for their own progress? It's been the incubators the whole time? Well, I mean, we can't take everything that Kyubey says as fact. Even though he says he's emotionless, we can't take everything he says as fact. We'll say this is the most sinister rainbow ever in anime history. Happy Pride Month! As you have this sinister rainbow surrounding Madoka as she writhes in despair. And she's like, they all trusted you. They trusted you and betrayed them. And Kyubey's like, now hold on there, little missy. We didn't betray them. That shot of Kyubey with her spinning like from the ED there. Oh my God, it's insane. He's like, we didn't betray them. It was their own wishes. And he says, no matter what their hopes were. So here, this I think is going to be like a big crux to all of this. It says, whatever the hope was, despite that, I'm going to put that on here. Despite that, anything that goes beyond reason, anything that goes beyond reason, what does he say there? Will, without fail, cause some sort of distortion. Will cause a distortion. So he's like, basically, if y'all keep wishing for things that are not physically possible, then then yeah, this is going to keep happening. All these magical girls wished for things that weren't physically possible, but we made the impossible happen. But the counter of that is that they become witches. That's just how it works. Oh my God, and the spiral that she does. It's only natural that this would result in disaster. Yeah, it's all been this big Faustian, like, be careful what you wish for, monkey's paw thing from the beginning. If you consider a natural consequence like that to be a betrayal. I love how it shows her, like slowly, like, curling backwards. Then their mistake was to make those wishes in the first place. Not that I'm calling them foolish. It can't be denied their sacrifices have shaped human history. Oh my God. And then we get like the sink and everything like rinsing away. So I wondered if Madoka had hit like a realization here as she's like kind of spiraling. He's like, well, the current standard of living you enjoy was made possible by all those tears shed in the past. And I got very much Berserk vibes from this moment, being like everything that shaped the course of history has been because of these people's sacrifices. There's a big Berserk connection there. And I was like, uh-huh. Yep, see that happening, especially with the tears and everything. If you read Berserk, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I love that tear shedding. That shot of Kyubey's shadow and the chair by her bed. Oh, that's such a good shot. And then he's like, if you understand that, how can you be obsessed with the lives of a select few? So, in this regard, Kyubey is saying that there is no point. There's no point in saving the few when your sacrifice benefits the many. That's Kyubey's standard. And he's basically saying, like, once you become a witch and destroy this planet, we got enough energy, you've saved the galaxy, okay, we're going to pack up and go to the next planet and do it all over again. Oh. And so then, it's like, do you really feel nothing while watching over the girls this whole time? And Kyubey is like, our people don't understand emotions. I like that they say, she's like, if we could, we wouldn't have come all this way to this planet in the first place. Kyubey's like, it really was kind of, he's like, in our society, emotion is a rare mental disorder. I was like, oh my God. It's like, Kyubey is the worst, and their people don't believe in emotions. They almost feel like robots, but they look organic, which is so interesting. It's like, we never imagined a world could exist where each individual possesses its own set of emotions. So basically, Kyubey, they're all like the Borg. They're a big hive mind, a big collective. They don't believe in emotions. They're kind of robotic. Very sci-fi. I love it. And she's like, if none of you had ever come to this planet. And he's like, well, then you'd probably be still living in caves. I like Kyubey shuts that down because it almost seems like Kyubey's like, don't you be wishing for us to never have been here. Because then, yeah, you would all be back in the Stone Age. Don't even think. I like that Kyubey quickly shuts that thought down. Like, don't be getting any ideas about wishing me away. I don't know. I wonder if maybe Madoka will try to find a wish that connects Kyubey's well-being to her own. That connects Kyubey to her. I wonder if she would be like, I wish that your fate is directly tied with mine. And then Kyubey would be like, what the fudge? No, wait. Because if she becomes a witch, then Kyubey is like, wait, what about me? And then it would take Kyubey down, and there would be no more witches. Because there would be no more magical girls. And she'd be like, well, you guys will leave, and we'll be fine. I don't know if that's going to happen next episode. If Madoka's going to be like, I'm going to make a wish that you can't make any more magical girls, Kyubey. And then we'll just see what happens. And he'll be like, hold on. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But that thought did cross my mind. So then we have the bar scene with the mom. Right? We immediately cut from Kyubey to the bar scene with the mother and the teacher. Right? I love this whole episode's in the rain. The ambiance of it is really, really good. And I love the shot of the whiskey glass with the mom as she's like hanging out with the teacher in her martini. It's really good. The red and blue like vibes of this bar are amazing. And there's the teacher and the mom. And the mom is on the side. And then there's the portrait of God touching Adam's hand. And the teacher's on like the side with Adam. And the mom's on the side with God. And they're like meeting in the middle. I'm so fascinated about everything about this scene. The dual lighting, the red and blue. I'm like, have the mom and the teacher been having an affair? Have they been coming together here and having drinks because they know each other? had this thought that I had this crazy theory in my head that the mom and the teacher were like older magical girls, that they'd become magical girls and they'd somehow transitioned into adulthood just fine and everything was still okay. But I don't even know how you have kids if you've disconnected your soul from your body, so that can't be. I had a thought, and then as the scene was going on, I'm like, no, that's not possible. But this conversation, now the teacher doesn't have any kids. She's not married. So she's having the conversation with the mom, talking about how hard it is to lose Sayaka, and they don't even know what's happened. And they're like, we're in the dark. And she's like, it sounds like Sayaka-chan had trouble with a friend over a boy. She's taking all this pretty hard as well. So Hitomi's taking it hard too. I'm in love with the blue drink in the glass with the teacher surrounded by red. And then you have the mom in her blues with the red whiskey. Like, the color composition and everything about this whole episode. This whole episode's gorgeous. Like, Shaft, I officially love Shaft as a studio. Their series are gorgeous. I love looking at them. And she's like, it would normally blow over, when a friend gets in a fight with a friend over a guy, but now it's ended like this. And I like how the mom's also represented in kind of like purple. So she's like a mix of it, which is interesting. And so then the teacher says there, she's like, it's not going to blow over anymore. And the mom's just kind of blinking, looking at her. And she's like, the police are going to rule it as an accidental death from mental stress. And then she's like, how's Madoka? And she's like, I don't know. She's like, my gut tells me my daughter knows about this, but it doesn't seem like she's lying. So she's like, I don't know what my own daughter is up to. And I like kind of seeing the mom in this state of vulnerability where she's just like, I don't know how to reach my daughter, and I'm concerned about it. Because she's like, I trust her, but... And in Sayaka, or not Sayaka, the teacher, who has the drink that's blue like Sayaka, says that she's never seen her like this. She's like, something's weighing on your mind. And she's like, well, she doesn't come to talk to me anymore. And the teacher's like, well, kids are hard that day, at that age. You turn around one day and they're suddenly all grown up. She's like, it must be a big shock for the parents. I love the mom, and I kind of want to see more of her in this series, but we only have one episode left in the movie. And they're like, you just need to believe in her. She needs some time to sort out her feelings, which the problem is there is no time. And there is no space because Kyubey's bothering her, and this giant mother lode witch is here. She's like, it's hard not to be able to do anything. And she's like, that's the Junko I've always known. So at this moment, we have like the fingers meeting, right? The connection there being like, it's hard to be powerless and not know what to do. And so it's like, what is these two fingers touching representing? What is that going to represent for the rest of the story? We'll see. So then Homura ends up, I like that how we have this parallel of the teacher and the mom having a conversation and meeting eye to eye. And then we have Madoka and Homura. And I'm amazed. Homura actually told her everything. She finally just broke down, and it almost felt like a goodbye. Because she's like, I know that I don't want to put you in harm's way, but I've got to tell you what's been going on. And again, we go back. I like that we have we have Plan A. We have all of these different things. It seems like maybe in 1914, the Mother Lode Witch was created. Was she created from other witches? I don't know. And then we have like the poem again. Einar. What is that? I want to go back to that. There's something gear. I'm going to go back and get some translating up in here and see if I can translate some of this new stuff that's come around, because I want to see what we have here. I'm going to choose German, obviously, because that's the language we're using it. So a fool. Einar is a fool. And we heard the other witches say, I like fools, I don't like fools. We've seen that. Gear is gear in German. And then we have and it's nefek something. Nick. Don't think that one's translatable right now. And then we have the wall. So there's at least like 5 little girl witches that are aligned with it as well. Oh my gosh, crazy talk. Yep, and all the gears and everything. And she's like, is that the witch? And she's like, yeah, Kyoko told me about it. That 2 of you need to team up. And I like that, Homura doesn't really lie. She's like, yeah, I was just kind of saving face before because this was a different timeline. But it's so hard because after last episode, I love Homura so much and I feel for Homura and I can tell that the reasons why she doesn't want to open up to Madoka. But during this scene, I was like, girl, you've got to talk to her. Now's your chance. Like, tell her how much of a friend you are. And that's when she says it doesn't need to hide itself within a barrier. If it manifests even once, thousands will die. And since ordinary people can't see it, they'll just call it a natural disaster. Ah. So, and of course, Madoka and her, they don't want these people to die. So she's like, I'll take care of it myself. And Madoka's like, I don't want to... Madoka's like, I want to believe you, but you also... She's like, you're not going to be all right. She's like, I don't know what you're saying is true. And knowing Homura is so introverted and so shy socially, for her to open up to Madoka in this moment, it's such a moment because she's like, I want to talk to you. I want to tell you how this is. She's like, but I don't really know how to tell you how I feel. This is really hard. She's like, I'm not living in the same time as you. And I love her hair flip. I love everything. And when she gives her the big hug, oh my God. It's so good. It's so good. Madoka's like, what do we do about this? And she's like, I came from the future. And I love we get to see in this moment the different timelines, like the different columns separate the different Homuras, and it almost looks like multiple vision, like double vision. Yep. And she's like, I met you over and over again, and each and every time I've had to watch you die. Oh, she's like, how can I save you? How can I change your fate? I've gone back in time over and over again searching for that answer. And Madoka's like, oh, shit. Well, wait a minute. Oh, and she's like, I'm sorry. I probably sound crazy and I must be creeping you out. I love the back. You get like the backlog of all the gears and everything. It's all in the pastel colors against the shadow of her and Madoka. So in this timeline, it's only been a month, right? It's not like in some of the other timelines where it was shorter or longer. And she's like, but to me, you're my best. She's like, you're my best friend. Oh, and we see all the memories of her. The further in time we drift apart from one another. Yeah. And our feelings also drift apart. My words don't reach you anymore. So she's like, before we became good friends, and then the further it goes, it gets worse and worse. Ugh. I felt for Homura in this moment, but I'm so glad she told her. She's like, I think I lost myself a long time ago, but I'm going to save you. That was all I had in mind when I began this. And now that I've come this far, it's the one thing I have left to guide me. And roll credits. She's like, all I can do is protect you. And that's all I've got left. Oh. And she's like, I beg of you. Ugh. But we all know that at this point it seems like she's going to turn herself into a magical girl. And she's like, you're... So you have Homura that all she has left to keep her from turning into a witch is to protect Madoka. So I don't know. I don't know if one of the options is that she becomes a magical girl and that her thing is to Homura that she's like, you're going to stay with me. And she's like, you can stay and protect me from becoming a witch. Maybe that's it. Maybe she's like, look, I'll become a magical girl and defeat this witch. Your goal is to stay alive and we keep each other safe. And we keep each other from basically from losing each other. But I'm like, but the whole thing with the karmic destiny is the one thing throwing me off. I'm like, how Madoka has figured out how she's going to circumvent that, I don't know. Because Kyubey has established that there's all this karmic destiny wrapped up in Madoka. So how is she going to undo that to not become a witch? I don't know. I don't know. But the whole scene, like I love the preparing for the storm as Homura gets ready for this witch to come and they're all bunkered down in the shelter. Madoka's little brother is so cute. He's so tiny there and he looks adorable. Ugh. I can't. Like this part where he's like, are we camping? He's like, yeah, we're camping here tonight. And the dad and them are so nice. And he like lifts him up into the air. Oh my God. It's like so wholesome. And it's like everything else that's about to go down. And And then, yeah, Homura and her. And she tosses that hair back. The moment, like, the elephants, like, start coming up and they squash the little bug, and there's, like, this circus coming in. And then, like, the lace curtains go back, and there's, like, the doily. Oh, it's so good! I'm like, oh my god. And then there is the mother lode of all witches. I love the countdown. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then here we go. And she looks exactly like she did the other times. Except now you can see she, like, has a very Victorian dress. She looks very medieval. It's like she's been around for a while. And it's like, oh my god, no. And so, yeah, we get to see Homura's transformation into the magical girl. And she's like, okay. The thing that's so heartbreaking is that she spent all this time collecting all of this weaponry. She spent all this time collecting all of this weaponry, and to what avail? It's like she had all these nukes, and they did not... I'm surprised nobody took any footage of this at all. They have none of this on film. But she did not put a dent in this damn witch. Like, at this point, I don't know how they're going to kill her either, because she had all of these bombs and everything go off. I'm like, how in the world is that going to work? I do love the design of the Motherlode Witch, and even her design kind of looks like a W2. It's pretty great. I'm just like, ugh, I hate it. It's so sad. Because nothing seems to destroy it. I thought whenever she had all the bombs go off at once, it kind of looked like the seats of Sayaka's concert hall inside her witch world. But that doesn't work. And she has all like little tiny fairies helping her. So then Madoka goes to the bathroom, she says. And she's outside. I love the shot of the trees and everything blowing, and it all looks like Chiaroscuro, and it's all like shady and everything. And Madoka's like, can she win by herself? And Kyubey is like, well, if I told you no, would you believe me? Which is essentially Kyubey being like, no, she can't defeat it by herself. And Madoka, he's like, there's no point in me trying to convince you now. See for yourself. Just see how far she can get against it. And Madoka, she's like, why does she push herself so hard to fight? And he's like, because she hasn't given up hope. It's like, if it comes down to it, she'll nullify this timeline like the others and continue fighting. But that's not what happens. Instead, she decides that she's going to let herself go and give up because she doesn't want to put the burden on Madoka anymore. Which is interesting. Kyubey says that people are going to do certain things and then they don't do those things. So Kyubey is not a know-all. He suggests and has hypotheses, but he's not always correct. He's like, if she stops or gives up, then she'll become a witch at that point. And I love that look from Madoka. It's like the wheels are turning in her head. I don't know what those wheels are saying, but... And then I think that's when Madoka realizes she is going to give up because she doesn't want to hurt her anymore because she's her friend. Because she saw her crying on her shoulder. The moment she believes that everything was pointless and that your fate can be changed. Oh, I didn't notice in the reaction it changes to where Homura is on the strings instead of Madoka. Oh, I didn't notice that in the reaction. Yeah. The moment she believes everything is pointless and your fate can't be changed, she'll succumb to despair and become a grief seed. Is it bad that I want to see her witch form? Is that bad? I don't want to see the witch form because that sounds terrifying, but I kind of want to just see like a concept art of it. But I don't want her to become a witch. No. She has to continue fighting even if she has no chance of winning. She's like every other magical girl in history. So, in this regard, Kyubey also says that every magical girl has essentially gave up hope. They gave up hope because there was no chance of winning. Which, you know what? Kind of sounds, tying back to the conversation we've had about girls early on in the series, when it was suggesting that this series is pointing out how much girls have riding on them with perfection. So, in this case, Kyubey is kind of reinforcing that, being like, yeah, teenage girls, you gotta win, or you lose and fall into despair. There's no other way. It's either black or it's white. And Kyubey makes it sound like it's an all or nothing thing. You either have hope or you have despair. There's no in between. And as we've seen from the conversation with the mom and through Madoka in this series, it's like girls are expected to be perfect. And if they're not perfect, then there's something wrong with them. So like this. So I'm wondering if something Madoka is going to do is be like, no, we aren't perfect. We may lose a battle. But just because we lose a battle doesn't mean that we're doomed. It doesn't mean just because we make a mistake doesn't mean that we're doomed to failure. And that ties back to the conversation with the mom that she had earlier, where it was like, just because the mom was like, look, just because you fail doesn't mean that's like a bad thing. Sometimes you got to crack a few eggs to make some scrambled eggs. So maybe she's going to take her mom's advice from that conversation and apply it. But how that's going to happen, I don't exactly know. How she's going to do that, I don't know. And she's like, you saw it too, didn't you? All the girls. And Madoka's really sad in this moment about it. But after she's crying, she says, but. And she says, but, like, just because there's this despairing situation doesn't mean that there's no hope. And then she turns to go. And that's when the mom stops her. Mm-hmm. And I like the mom's like, where do you think you're going? And at first I thought the mom was going to go with her. And I was like, oh my gosh. She's like, I have to save my friend. She's like, we have civilians. And she's like, it has to be me. And the mom like smacking her in that moment as the power lines. I like the power lines like flickering to show at that smack. She's like, you're not the only person in this world. Do you know how much the people around you care about you? And she's like, I do know. I do understand. I love that shot of the mom. Oh my God, the mom's face in that moment looks incredible. The mom's animation there, that she, like, all of that pain and turmoil that she's like, do you know what you're doing? Do you understand what you're doing? Like, your family cares about you. I'm so glad this moment happens because one of the things was, like, with Sayaka and with Kyoko, again, like Mommy said, the wish was, in Mommy's case, she was basically on death's door. She didn't really have much choice but to make the wish, right? Regardless of what happened. In Sayaka's case, she didn't think about any of the consequences of what was happening around her. She was just like, oh, here's a guy, I'm going to save him. And here we go. And in Kyoko's case, she thought that that was what he wanted. And so that would benefit him, but didn't think of the ramifications. So the mom is like saying, okay, we've seen in this series the consequences of acting without thinking. Have you thought this through? Do you know how your family thinks about you? And it almost seems like the mom is saying, are you aware that becoming a magical girl is going to potentially sever your ties with us and everyone around you? And have you thought about that? Which I'm like, yeah, how are we going to avoid that? How's she going to avoid like doing that? What's going to happen? And she's like, I love you too, Mom, and Dad too. I know how much you all care about me. And I know I need to value my own life. But this is different. It's because you're all so important to me that I have to protect you. So yeah, she's not protecting them just for herself. She's like, you guys are all important, so I have to do something to protect you. I'm like, but I don't know how this is going to go down. I'm like, ugh. That's why there's somewhere I have to be right now. And the mom is like, you can't tell me anything about this. And she's like, no. And she says to take her with her. And Madoka's like, no, that's not going to work. That's not going to work at all. She's like, I can't. She's like, you need to stay with Tatsuya, her brother, and her dad. She's like, don't make them worry about you. The expressions of the mom are so damn good. And she's like, you said I'm a good girl. And you said I don't lie. And I haven't done anything bad. Do you still believe me? Do you still trust me, basically, that I'm going to make the right choice? And I like that she's like, okay. And she reaches out to her, like, to try to take her back or to try to do something and connect with her. But then she stops, and it's like she lets Madoka have this moment and trusts her and is like, okay, I'm going to let you go, but, she's like, are you sure you're not making a mistake? You're not being misled by anyone's lies. You know, like Kyubey. She's like, you know what? You're not being tricked by anybody. You're not being misled. You know, you've thought this all through. We've gone over all the scenarios. She's like, that's right. And then the mom, like, shoves her along her way. I'm like, I hope you made the right decision there. I don't know. Oh, I'm so nervous because like every scenario is pointed that this is going to end horribly, but what do we do? But what do we do? And then there's the witch, and we see the exact same scenario that we saw back at the very beginning with the building hitting her. And she gets her foot stuck, and then she's like, why can't I beat it no matter how many times I've tried? And I love that her skirt makes the eye. That's so creepy. Oh my god. And she's about to take time back, but then she's like, if I do it again, it'll only hurt Madoka more. And I like that her stone is on her hand, interestingly enough. And then she just decides to let it go. Oh, I hate it. And right as she's about to die, Madoka grabs her hand and says, that's enough. You've done enough, Homura. Oh. I don't know how this... I'm with Homura. How can this end well? And that's when, of course, Kyubey shows up. And she's like, son of a bitch, that cat's here. And then she says, I'm sorry. Ah! I'm like, I know Homura's going to argue with her next episode, but I'm just like, but how? How? What did that preview say? I actually did watch the preview this time because I love that picture of them. Also, I'm noticing in the final end card, your primary colors are together, where it's red, yellow, and blue, and then you have purple and pink on the outside. So she says, if someone says it's wrong to have hope, then I will tell them they're wrong every single time. I know my determination will never waver. My very best friend. So, what do we do? What do we do? It looks like the soul gem on Madoka is on the leash that's around her. So I don't know if it's attached to her body or not. Like the soul gem for the others was like on their head or in their heart or like on their heart or their stomach or their hand. So I don't know what we're going to be doing with that if it's connected that way. And it looks like Madoka has Kyubey like wrapped around her. So the only thing I can think of is if Madoka makes some kind of wish that forces Kyubey to be with her, and Kyubey doesn't want to die, so it keeps her from becoming a witch. That's the only thing I can think of. But otherwise, I don't know how they're getting around her not becoming a witch. I don't know how that's going to work. Kyubey said that Madoka could bend the laws of reality, and she could bend the very laws of physics itself, but I'm like, but how? I don't know. I don't know. You ask me if I know. I'm like, I know that Homura's like, I feel like, not Homura, but I feel like Madoka is like, all these magical girls in the past have gave up and not clung to hope. And I feel like Madoka's like, I want to be that symbol of hope for them. But I'm like, I don't know how that's going to translate. I don't know how, once she becomes a magical girl, isn't she going to be dead to her family, essentially? I don't know how this all... I don't know. And I'm about to go on a trip, and I'm going to have to wait a week before I can watch the season finale. I just want to, before I go into the season finale, and we do have the movie too, which I don't want to know. Here's the thing. I've made it to the final episode without any spoilers. I have somehow done it. It's been amazing. I don't want to know anything about the movie. I know it's called Rebellion, which makes me think that her, Madoka, and Homura, and like all the magical girls are going to rise up against Kyubey. That's instantly what I think of when I think of the title. That they're going to rebel against Kyubey and the incubators. That's what makes me think. I want to know nothing. Tell me nothing about the movie. Let me go in 100% blind if I can. And I don't want to know anything about the finale. But this series has been so much fun. I love it so much. And it's been one of the best shows I've watched in a long time. So I've really looked forward each week to this show and talking about it with y'all and theorizing. And I'm so happy that some theories have been right, some have been totally wrong. So I don't know what to expect going into this last set of episodes. This episode movie, I don't know what to expect, but it's gonna be a ride. So, in any case, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with the season finale, not the series finale, but the season finale of Puella Magi Madoka Magica. Bye.